3, 2, 1, 0.
Real people, real issues, real life. Talk Recovery Radio. Live from the heart of the downtown east side, it's Talk Recovery Radio with Giuseppe Ganci and Darren Gaylor on Vancouver's Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. From the streets to the studio, bringing you addiction recovery stories from real people with lived experience and real experts on today's issues. Tune in live every Thursday, noon to 1. Powered by New West Recovery. Real people, real issues, real life. Talk Recovery Radio.
And welcome to Talk Recovery Radio, everyone. My name is Giuseppe Ganci, and here's my co-host, Mr. Darren Gaylor. Hey, Darren, how are you?
What's happening? I dig that intro. Real life.
Yes, so do I. Yes, so do I. Real life, real issues.
Yeah, love it.
7 years of shows, hundreds of guests, thousands of listeners. We appreciate every single one of you, and happy to be doing this for this long. We like to start the show off with some hot topics, and a press release just came out. I'm going to take a look at it really quickly here. More than 1,700 lives lost in the province of British Columbia due to drug use and overdoses and so forth. It's the highest number ever to date, and that's a 74% increase since 2019. It's definitely a lot of people. I mean, I don't get it. We are one of the, I just dropped something here, one of the provinces that spends the most money on addiction and healthcare and recovery. Well, I don't wait, back up. We don't spend the most money on recovery, that's for sure. But yeah, we spend so much money. I mean, we're buying up $50 million hotels. You know, apparently, hundreds of people are dying in these hotels. Not just, they're calling it using a loan section, but it's in all these SROs and so forth. It's just a big mess.
Yeah, it's a bunch of juggling, and everywhere across the board, it lacks some form of therapy for, you know what I mean? Whether it's, trauma therapy or just sitting down with somebody and asking them, what they want and where they want to go. It's just a bunch of juggling and trying to clean it up optically. And that's just a ton of grieving people.
A ton. My condolences to all those families. Just in the month of December alone, 5 people a day died from drug use in the province of BC. I mean, not even. I mean, everyone's doing COVID and all this other kind of stuff, and so this is what's actually killing so many of our citizens and so forth. And what boggles my mind, and for those of you that follow our Facebook pages or my Facebook page, I just had a meeting with the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions a couple of days ago, and just today, a letter surfaced about how the same minister is asking Ottawa to exempt all the laws and make drugs decriminalized. And I just, I support her in what she's doing, but I just don't think BC is ready to actually do what Portugal did. And they're not, because the mayor of Vancouver, which we talked about in this show, has no interest in actually what Portugal did. He's just doing what he wants to do and wants that title of the first mayor in Canada to decriminalize drugs. There's no way he's going to be held to the honor that Dr. Golau is in Portugal. I mean, I sent him a letter saying you're going to be a disgrace and just one of the failures in the harm reduction model in British Columbia because you're actually going against the science. And I put it in an email right to him. I'm like, you're failing the system and so many people are going to die simply because you are not following the Portuguese model of decrim. And he replied, ain't interested, don't have time to meet.
Yeah. I mean, that's the sad thing. I mean, we voiced our opinion. I did last week on people that are just focused on the safe supply, and it's not that I don't think it's necessary. I do. I think the toxic drug supply is an issue and needs to be met with a safe supply, but it's just if you're talking safe supply and you're only talking about safe supply with an idea that that is the solution, that's who I'm calling a mophead. And
Yeah.
and the idea of safe supply so that they don't die that day from toxic drug supply, but then get them into an assessment and attempt to find more needs that need to be met, and that's the resources are missing and not even being discussed. And
I am going to just hold back and see what's going on, but we're going to talk about it on Talk Recovery Radio. The more we do, condolences to all those families that have lost loved ones due to drug use. Darren, we talk recovery with people from around the world. Today we got 2 guests on the show. Who are we talking with recovery today on Talk Recovery Radio?
Yes, we get to talk recovery with Dan Griffin. Dan Griffin is an internationally recognized author, thought leader, and the expert on men's relationships and masculinity, with a professional background of over 2 decades in the mental health and addictions field. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah. Interesting topic. I mean, you have a few books that you've authored and others you've co-authored. A Man's Way Through the 12 Steps. I like this one. What would men tell you if they weren't too busy watching TV? We'll get into that one. But let's get into man rules. This is on your website a few times, part of the books.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it's, that men don't cry, sort of, lessons in life, maybe generations ago that perhaps were necessary, or, to get a backbone developed in your young son. But it just sounds ridiculous this day and age. What other man rules are we talking about?
Yeah. So it's interesting, right? I mean, the man rules are the rules that we learn as little boys about how to be men.
Okay.
And you're right. I mean, things have changed so dramatically in the last 20 years that you would think they don't apply. But at the same time, they run very, very deep in our programming. And so it's more what I find in the conversations I have with men and women and professionals, it's how do they apply, not if they apply. And not looking for, like there's layers to the men don't cry rule, right? So in some ways it would be absurd to think that rule is as strong as it is. But at the same time, when it comes to men allowing themselves to feel, allowing themselves to express sadness, allowing themselves to be in intimate relationships with other men and with women and express more vulnerability, how are they able to do that? How have they learned to do that? And, the man rules, there's a lot of them. I did an exercise one time in Illinois in the States, and we filled 3 flip charts full of the man rules that these 16 and 17-year-olds had come up with. And so it's interesting. It's, don't cry, don't ask for help, don't be vulnerable, use sex as intimacy, be a protector, be a provider, don't be gay. And again, don't be gay. We've come so far when it comes to that. But at the same time, like men giving themselves permission to be intimate with other men and not see that intimacy as sex or sexual.
Right.
So there's these layers to it.
Well, even just the language, like the word intimacy, it's like, I mean, we're talking communication in an honest way, like you say, vulnerability. I mean, all of these components create an intimate connection, and often confused with sexual intimacy and emotional intimacy and that sort of thing. Like, so just teaching our youth what it means,
teaching our youth, teaching adults. I mean, I'm only 48, and I've got a lot of living to do, and I've got a lot of relationships to try to connect with, and I got that stuff got corrupted in me. And, you know, when I say men being intimate with other men, you know, immediately people think sexually, but I'm talking about like how men connect.
That's right.
And that's intimacy. And you know
Yeah.
what we're doing right now is having an intimate conversation because we're not talking about sports, weather, or politics.
Right on.
You know?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I'm wondering, with all like the conversations you've had, all the people you've talked to, you must have come across, you know, some individuals that naturally learned intimacy with the humankind, like not separating genders, and they were taught, for lack of a better words, the right way. Can you, like, you know, what's the common denominator? Was it, you know, was it raised by a single mom? Was it, you know what I mean? Like, do you have a little equation in there?
Yeah, you know, I mean, it's interesting. I've had these conversations with men from all over the country, all over, you know, internationally.
Yeah.
And and it's interesting how it shows up because there's oftentimes this sense of like for the men that I talk to, regardless of how conscious they are of their masculinity, regardless of how able they are to navigate relationships and intimacy, there's a sense of loss in what they didn't get. There's a sense of loss in what they had taken from them because they thought they had to be a man, because they thought they had to perform this masculinity. And you know, when you're performing to be a man, it's you only have so much you can do to win. And it seems that you're always this far from losing, you know, from losing, having it taken away. And you know, we talk about the man card, people talk about a man card and having that revoked. But you know, with the guys that seem to come upon this more naturally, I think there's still a sense of like, how do I give myself permission to be an authentic man and still do this stuff when it's still not viewed as being that manly?
Right. It's just the somebody else's perspective over natural human instinct. Like I'm starting to understand, like, it's natural to want to just cry in sadness and in pain because you know, you weren't felt loved, or you weren't heard, or you know, you were discounted in some way. And the sort of second nature to just hide that and just pretend like it's fine, like
We
that's
learn that,
ingrained pretty early.
yeah, we learn it. We learn to hide that. We learn to deny that. We learn to think that that's not manly. We've learned, you know, and think of the cost that it is, you know, the
Yeah.
cost that it has on us for living that way in our relationships, what it means when a man is unable to express himself emotionally or more vulnerably in his relationships, his most intimate relationships, and not being able to really connect. And I don't believe that that's natural. I believe that we've learned all that and we've decided that that's how men are. And so this process of becoming a more conscious man is really a process of unlearning.
Yeah.
You know, unlearning all that I was taught that was not okay, that was not supposed to be manly. I mean, I've got a little girl and she's 11, and it's like, how am I showing her what a man is? And we were watching This Is Us last night, and I was moved to tears, and she was seeing me cry. And you know, that to me is healthy. And
Yeah.
that to me is what I want her to see in a man. I want her, when she, you know, if she identifies as heterosexual and she's looking for a man later in her life, then I want her to have a model that says this is what it can be like, and this is who you can have in your life.
You know, one of the things a person in living experience, I remember vividly coming into recovery. I wasn't one of those professional patients where I had decades of therapy or counseling. Like I got caught at work using drugs. They sent me to rehab. I was just like, what's wrong with everybody, you know? But I remember there was a process that happened where I went to a men's program that's got a sister I work at Last Door, one of the people behind this show, and the women's facility, you know, down the street. And there was these type of therapy kind of recovery workshops, like building healthy relationships with men. I never thought about that when I was out there. But then like women building healthy relationships with women, and it wasn't normal. Like I never talked about that. Like for me, and you know, I'm part of the LGBT community. Like there was one thing that men were for. I never ever thought that I'd have to build healthy relationships, and the same thing I would hear women talk about how like I wouldn't hang out with women because they were competition. Like my friends are men, and toxicity, like I wasn't aware. And I'm glad that you write this book and that you talk about this, because a lot of people really don't think it's a problem, but it's a huge issue out there. It's like, how can we look at people of the same sex as actual equals, you know, and friends?
Absolutely. And how do we just connect as human beings? You know, I mean, you know, that's one of the questions that you were asking is how does this transcend gender? I mean, I think the idea is that the more conscious we become of these rules that we follow, because there's the woman rules, there's the man rules, there's the rules for gender, and these rules are really powerful, but we don't know we're following them. I use a quote from David Foster Wallace, was an author who wrote a book called Infinite Jest and many other books, but he gave a talk and he talked about this concept called the water, and I use that in my talks. And basically it's, you know, two fish are at the bottom of the ocean. Another fish swims up and says, "Hey guys, how's the water?" and swims off. And the two fish look at each other and they say, "What the hell is water?" and that's us, right? I mean, like, we're living in the water of gender and we don't realize it. And so it's like, how do I, in all of my interactions, pay closer attention to how I'm coming across as a man because I identify as male? How am I coming across, and how do I want to come across? How do I want to be? And what gets in the way for me being that? Because I've been doing this for a while, and you know, I'm a recovering alcoholic. I'm a recovering asshole too. You know, yep. And long into my sobriety, I've been that guy where it was like, why am I acting this way? And I didn't understand past trauma. I didn't understand, you know, and guys and trauma, I mean, come on. Yeah. Real men don't have trauma. And so how do you support men in looking at those painful experiences? And like you were saying, you know, how do, you know, having healthy relationships, it's everything. And yet get men to acknowledge how important that is to them can be challenging, because it's not manly to talk about relationships. I mean, I wrote a book called A Man's Way Through Relationships, Learning to Love and Be Loved. Who writes a book like that? You know, I mean, but it was true. I interviewed men and that's what they were talking about.
Somebody's got to. Yeah.
Somebody's got to. And that's what I told the publishers who kept turning me down. They're like, guys aren't going to read a book like this. And I said, well, they're definitely not going to read it if you don't publish it.
I mean, I come from, you know, substance abuse, addiction, you know, so there was always that primary problem. Yeah. You know, and you hear the cliches, you know, that's just a symptom, and you know, there's more work to do and all of that. But I mean, once I was, you know, quit the substance, it's like, that's it. You know, like the unconscious values and beliefs, and you know, the ass that I wasn't the problem. And so you have all of these men with these belief systems of better than, ego driven, you know, what is the head that is it divorce? Is it somebody standing up? Is it their partner? Because they're in a position where they don't maybe are listening to their partners, you know? So what's the what's the signs and symptoms that somebody needs to read your book?
Well, being a man, I would say, is the first sign and symptom. I really did try to write it for all men in recovery.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, a man's way through the 12 steps is for people in 12-step recovery, and I recognize there are many pathways to recovery. But you know, a man's way through relationships, that's broader and really written for men in relationships in recovery. And you know, I would say when I think emotional sobriety is a big part of it. And I think that can be elusive for a lot of guys early in sobriety. And so, you know, when they find themselves still being an asshole, even after they've stopped using and they're wondering, why am I behaving this way? Or when they are in a relationship and they're struggling to connect and they're struggling to open up and they're struggling to have intimacy, when they thought, well, I thought alcohol and other drugs was the issue that was preventing me from doing this. I think those are times where men will look to, you know, additional resources like my books and be like, what else is there? You know, what else might I be able to find that can help me navigate life and most importantly, have these healthy relationships that Giuseppe was talking about. I mean, it's everything. It's everything to me today. You know,
It's so
to have
wild
those.
in hindsight. Then years later, it's like, oh my goodness, what was I thinking? You know, I don't know if you've ever had those days. I have them quite often, and it's just if I just would have listened and you would say that, you know, I was an asshole, and it's true. Like people, we forget, like, yeah, drug use, addiction, disease, but like I had a major attitude problem, like, and that needed to get fixed more. Not just the physical harms that I had from substance use and the psychological harms I may have had, but also, you know, the social part of my life like really needed to change. And so in building relationships that were healthy was part of that. You know, you have a few books. You know, the other book that I'm interested in as well is your guide, man's guide to through the 12 steps. Um, is there a difference for, like, my first question is, was it different for a man and a woman? You know, if you go to Twitter, it is. If you go to Facebook news threads, it definitely is. Everyone's got their opinions, but you wrote a book on it. So what is the difference between a man's guide through the 12 steps?
Yeah, you know, I mean, one thing for the hardcore folks out there who love the big book and love the 12 and 12, I'm not trying to rewrite the literature. I'm trying to add something to the conversation. And part of the difference is, you know, I would talk to other men and I would talk to men before meetings and after meetings. There was a lot we weren't talking about in the meetings that we were talking about after the meetings that had to do with like sex and had to do with, you know, how the fourth step and the sex inventory. And what did that mean to write that as a man? What does it mean for a man to admit powerlessness when so much of our ego is driven by having power? What does it mean for a man to ask for help and to surrender? How does a man navigate working the 12 steps in a way that, you know, what I found in talking to men and the research that I did is that men didn't realize how much their masculinity was changing as a result of working the steps. You know, they just kind of thought, I'm working the steps because that's what I'm doing. But then I would follow up with questions like, so you used to go around hugging other men? You know, you used to go around asking for help, having intimate conversations with other men. You used to, you know, really see sex as only one form of connection and intimacy, you know. And they'd be like, well, no. And then it would click. They'd see the water, so to speak, and it'd be like, oh, wow, there's this whole conversation that I can have about who I am as a man that I may or may not be having, or that I may be having sometimes, but not all the time. And that's why I wrote the book. The whole thing is written from the perspective of being a man in recovery and how we've been conditioned and what we go through when we work those steps. And what does it mean for a man to sit in meditation when your whole being is told you have to do something to have value,
Yeah.
and yet meditation is sitting and being quiet.
There's that whole thing, we're bros, and that whole idea of manhood and that gangster thing, and whatever, and in the gay community, it's the flamboyant, I need to be careful with my words here. It's how we identify without upsetting people. It's how we identify ourselves to show our manhood. There was a Giuseppe that lived in the West End of Vancouver. There was a Giuseppe that lived in Yaletown. There was a Giuseppe that lived in the downtown East Side, and there was all those three Giuseppes kind of going on. And when you go to a meeting and there's newcomers there, it's like the thug life. You can pick and choose,
Right.
and it's like, this is my identity. And when you start to do work and you try to help somebody see that that's a mask and it's not identity, integrity and all that kind of stuff. Does this book help, and your other book as well, does it help individuals realize that maybe what you think is nobility of manhood really isn't, and it's just fear and all that kind of stuff? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think what my books do, I try to get men to have curiosity about who they are as men, and to ask questions, of themselves. How am I living as a man? And is this the man I want to be? Is this the type of man that I want to be? And what does my authentic self look like? And in many ways, it's like, who is my authentic self outside of masculinity, without having to worry about the rules? If I didn't have to worry about the rules, what would be my relationship to asking for help? If I didn't have to worry about the man rules, what would be my relationship to being vulnerable? If I didn't have to worry about the man rules, how would I show up in my relationships? And so I think it's about transcending the rules, or at least being conscious of them, so that you really know how you can show up and how you're supposed to show up for you in a most authentic way. And so it's, I always say, don't let the rules rule you. And that's it. It's not about getting rid of anything as much as it's about being conscious of the man you want to be. And I always say, it's not about doing it perfectly, it's about doing it consciously. And you're going to make mistakes. There's going to be lots of challenges that you have, but those challenges are part of the growing process. And all those imperfections are the ways that we connect to a more authentic self, if we can learn from it.
Well, I can just imagine, for the men that get clean, sort of conquer their addiction, and are left with, whoever they were through how they grew up, how they were raised, what they were given, what needs weren't met, and everything. That just taking a look at this, it's only going to develop a better relationship. It's only going to develop your ability to be a mentor, or for somebody to look up to. And I mean, just thinking about I got two little kids as well, and how many times just from some dark recess of my brain, my dad, or what I mean, like it just, and how much I am somewhat part of just these unconscious values that I lived with. And to accept that, I get to weed out which ones I want and which ones I don't want. And if I don't have that type of literature in front of me, when am I going to look at that? When am I going to consciously, consider all of these things? In your research, like, research or just experience, like, what has been the biggest fear for men? I hate to generalize, but what is it that seemed to go among the thread through cultures and ethnicities and everything?
I think there's a fear that a lot of men have of not being viewed as a man, not being accepted as manly. And that fear drives so much of the behavior. is trying to get the acceptance, trying to get the acceptance from peers, whatever man they've got in their mind they have to be.
Right.
It's the fact that there's an imperative about who they have to be. And like Giuseppe was talking about, those masks that people have. A gay man can have a mask as much as a straight man can have a mask, but those masks may be different, but they're hiding the fear of that authentic self. The fear is, how am I going to be accepted and show myself for who I am and who I want to be?
Yeah. It's so interesting. I can't wait. I want to get a copy of this book and rather than just believe I'm as good as I'm going to be, and all of that, like it's really on my mind now, now raising, 2 children. Right. And it's, even if I didn't have kids, I think there comes a point in our age or natural progression where, we're thinking to ourselves, could I be better?
But Darren, that's the definition of recovery. Like, everybody thinks
That's right.
that, recovery is I stopped using today. And it's like you're talking about, like, recovery is an ongoing journey and it's everything. And like, people still need to do recovery at 10 years clean and 20 years clean. Why? Because we're always trying to find, what's the next best thing. And how, that whole quote, it keeps getting better, and it always does. And so that's the whole point of this. It's like, how can we always improve ourselves? And I don't want to just do recovery during the doctor hour when I'm getting, well, it's not even an hour anymore, it's a couple of minutes and a prescription pad. So like, what's after that? And this is what's after that, is building relationships. Really appreciate you being on the show. Definitely an insight. 2 awesome books. Thank you very much.
Yeah, happy to be with you.
And there's more books on the website. Check it out, dangriffin.com. There's also the Man Rules podcast to have a listen to. Again, thanks, Dan. Really appreciate you coming on Talk Recovery today.
You bet. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Dan.
And you're listening to Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM, also watching live on Facebook. Thank you to our viewers. And we have our second guest in the room.
Yes, we do. Powered by New West Recovery. We like to bring recovery issues to everybody out there, and 7 years of shows, hundreds of guests, and we've got our 302 guests. I should count one day, eh? Dylan, we've just been talking with Dan about building relationships, healthy relationships with men, helping men. That's our theme of the show today.
Awesome.
I've looked at your bio and your profile. Dylan Ledren is a recovery advocate, TED Talk speaker, inspirational speaker. I saw something about yoga somewhere in there, so maybe you're a yogi. Welcome to the show, Talk Recovery Radio. We really appreciate having you here.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Great to spend some time with you guys, and look forward to diving in.
So you have a personal story, like most of us do, that are in something to do with recovery. Usually, we get from despair to hope to inspire others. Tell us a little bit about your story and maybe what happened and what you're doing now.
Yeah, you got it. I grew up in a suburban area in Connecticut in the States, and I grew up pretty well. I grew up in a middle-class family. All my needs were met, at least physically. And at the same time, I felt like something was off at somewhat of an early age. And I remember that very clearly. Although, as young kids, we don't really have a way to contextualize that or put words to that. But I do remember that. And I also remember having this odd relationship with getting high. And I remember walking around my living room, my parents' living room, with Juicy Juice. And I got like drunk on Juicy Juice. I guess just kept drinking it until I was literally tipsy in my parents' living room, just like walking around, like stumbling. And I remember thinking, this is kind of cool, but at the same time, I was a little afraid because I was out of control. It was this like weird relationship with wanting to be out of myself, but still wanting to control, have a sense of control over reality. And so that was the first time I really had this this thing that we call, maybe this the seed of addiction. But
And
fast forward, and yeah,
And at the time, you didn't know that, but in hindsight, you look back, it's like, yeah, I remember when I
totally.
was young, I used to do this. It's not until after we realize. So, the story, some people call it hitting bottom. I'm not a huge fan of hitting bottom. I think when you stop digging, you stop digging. So at some point in your life, there's like, hey, the gig's up, like, whatever it is that I'm putting in my body is actually making my life worse.
Yeah.
Intervention? Did you have this like aha moment, and or did you like, go to rehab with carry on suitcase? How did you end up going from, which I'm sure there's a story going from that, because that's what people like moms at home listening, like, how did you end up
Mm.
going from I need help to the next phase?
So it was a little bit of everything you mentioned.
Yeah.
My the last thing that really did it for me was ending up in jail. So it
Okay.
was the loss of freedom that really, for some reason, hit me, because at that point I had already overdosed. I had been arrested numerous times. I had been in a detox. I've been in a psych ward for attempted suicide. I had had a lot of emotional pain, but for some reason it was that loss of freedom that finally, like, something clicked psychologically and gave me a willingness to make a change that I hadn't had before.
So enforcement is one of the obstacles in your life, because there's this big, huge push of, it's a disease and it's no one's fault, and let's decriminalize drugs. A lot of people don't understand a lot of the crime that goes on because of the result of drugs. Like, do you think did you have a drug possession, or was it a crime against a person?
There was a few. There was a
A
few
few.
different at that
So
point.
you
Of
got a
course, a few.
story.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Hey,
yeah. I
we
had
all do.
quite the resume.
Between the three of us, we would probably have a pretty good movie, or a pretty
Yeah,
scary.
right. There you go. Yeah.
Exactly. So you now gotten through all that, and you're in recovery. Um, everybody. I wouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people end up finding recovery, and it's in our step work. I'm not sure if you do step work, but to give back, and a lot of people feel like giving back is a way to share hope, and becoming a
Totally.
TED Talk speaker. I want to tell my story on the big stage. You've had some success in that, in the States. So I want to talk a little bit on what are some of the things you talk about. But before we get into that and some of Darren's questions, how did you prepare yourself because addiction has so much to do with ego, has so much to do with, I've got the biggest story in the world, I got to tell everybody. How do you keep yourself in
Yeah.
check? Because I remember when I was 30 days clean, I was ready to do a TED Talk. It's just like, I want to write a
Yeah.
book and a movie, and
Hmm.
we laugh about it, but it's a serious thing. So many
Mm.
people get caught up in it that they forget about recovery, and they just focus on everything else. So how's some of the ways you ground yourself and prepare yourself to become a recovery advocate?
That's a great question. And I'm somebody, like a lot of individuals struggling with substance use challenges. I'm somebody who has experienced a lot of doubt, a lot of insecurity, a lot of fear. So for me, it was almost like the opposite trajectory. So my ego manifested more internally as insecurity, doubt, and fear, as opposed to let me get my story out there, right? Uh, Having said that, the experiences of recovery forced me to own the value in those experiences in service of other people. And one of the commonalities in those experiences, whether they were 12-step based or other experiences, was the power of community. So that's how the TED Talk manifested, was through that message, which is so universal. And it forced me to kind of own, not kind of, it forced me to own the value in those experiences, not just for myself, but for other people. That being said, um, even the Big Book of AA talks about the different types of manifestations of ego, right? So you have the more external manifestation and the more internal. And so for me, it was actually a humble exercise to do the TED Talk. But I could see how it could easily be a way to just pump myself up, or for somebody else to pump themselves up. And I still have to watch out for that. I'm by no means immune from that. But my intention is very clear. It's to use the experiences that have helped me and to give a voice to those in a public way that can help other people.
I'm just reading through this info on you. It says you like to teach with your actions. You may find Dylan dancing at noon on a Thursday, doing spoken word at a local museum, or going out sober and solo to a karaoke. And it's sort of that same thing, you know, like people see you on your TED Talks, they hear the inspiration, you know, like we see people that are using this medium to share their story. And so many of us think like, well, I mean, that's that thing that somebody else does. Like, there's no way, you know, I don't have the security, I don't have the confidence. Is it something in our personalities that differs, or is this something that you know you found in your progression of recovery, like that there was this desire and now another level of confidence that you can just really be yourself, like you said, sober and solo?
Sober and solo, yeah. What the process was for me was getting into recovery, speaking in 12-step meetings, having feedback that I'm a good speaker, and then following that. So for a while, I had heard that on and off. And when I heard it more, I started to think about recovery advocacy, and I also started to see treatment culture shifting and recovery culture shifting in some good ways, in some really not so good ways. And in the not so good ways, I wanted to give a voice to the things that I had found helpful and still have that be part of the conversation.
Yeah.
So being validated for being a speaker, seeing I don't know what the right word is, but seeing a gap start to develop in treatment. I wanted to fill that gap with some of those experiences and messages. And since I had gotten validated for being a good speaker, I was like, well, I guess this is something I'm meant to do. At least that's kind of a spiritual outlook on it, right? It's like, if it's not meant to happen, it's not going to. And at the same time,
we like, I get thrown off sometimes when I see like, you know, a very famous musician get clean, and then, you know, they say that their talent is, you know, it's exemplary now from getting sober and clean. And you think sometimes that guy had that talent from the beginning, you know. And I wonder, like, did you have any of this talent, like, and also what gave you sort of the notoriety or the validation behind you that people listened, like, you know, rather than listen to the doctor, like, you know, what is it about you that they wanted to, you know, like, you've been a part of so many different treatment centers and helping organizations increase their engagement and improve long-term outcomes. Why you? Why not some doctor with numbers?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great question. And I don't know the full answer to that. I do know that those are all things that I feel confident in, that I've experienced in, that I want to help other people in those areas, and I've been blessed to be able to. But the innate drive, desire, or worth to do that. I mean, I was into acting for a while when I was younger, but I also was a very insecure, quiet kid. So it wasn't like I was this boisterous, outgoing, artistic guy.
Right.
I just, you know, it was part of my personality was wanted to be creative, wanted to be into acting. And so it was a part of me. But really, when I got into sobriety, when I got into recovery and started speaking at meetings, that's when it became evident that there was something there that was in me that wasn't necessarily, not everybody has that or wants that. Most people get freaked out when they're speaking on a stage, you know?
Right. Well, I mean, a big part of my own personal agenda and you know, the intent of the show and its early beginnings was, you know, there's not enough of us that actually have that experience, that knowledge, that passion that's going to change these policies and, you know, these programs, and no white coat guy with some numbers running through a computer is going to be, but that's who they've counted on. And there's so many of us that if they knew someone else, didn't have that experience either, and look at you now kind of thing, the more the merrier, let's say.
Totally.
I think we the people, all the people we've talked to on this show that come from the experience that you come from and have that passion and that desire to help other people and to make things better for recovering people. It's always been us that has made the biggest changes. So that's awesome.
Totally, man.
That's so great that you found that. Like, so, I mean, what is it that you do now in this COVID thing? I mean, are you able to, make your talks and be employed, so to speak? You're open for hire right now?
Yeah. So right now we're focusing a lot on virtual presentations, virtual coaching, things like that.
Yeah.
Especially in this time when there's so much isolation and disconnection. I've been focusing on the self-expression piece. So I'm a big fan, like you saw in my bio, of spoken word, slam poetry.
Cool.
So I do presentations on that with treatment centers or even individuals, and try to get them to be connected and authentic in their recovery process. Because when we do that, man, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but my experience is when we're more excited about our life, then we're more excited about our recovery. They're so interwoven that you can't really have one without the other, So that's something I've been focusing on a lot more. But one thing I want to say real quick, because you brought this up, was the advocacy thing. And it is so important for all of us to have, a voice, because there's not one person that speaks for the entire movement, and myself included. I'm just really passionate about this little niche and these few things that I think can really help. And that being said, not everyone's going to be okay with my views, your views, or anyone's views who speaks up. And I think that's okay. That's part of the dialogue. It's, can we have this dialogue and speak up about these things from a place of integrity and have a format for that? Because I think that's really important, to bring other parts of the puzzle into the equation. Because like you mentioned, there's really only a few parts that get the public's attention. Yeah. And they're not always congruent with what actually is happening in the recovery community on the ground floor.
Yeah. Have you looked into, bringing your message and your ideas into schools? Have you approached schools? And if you have, what sort of feedback have you gotten from that?
A little bit. I've just started to move in that direction. So my high school where I went to back in 1997, like, wow, over 2 decades ago.
We're almost in the same category here.
Yeah. Just so I've started to talk to them about bringing some presentations in there about prevention. Right. That hasn't happened yet, but we're in the early stages of that. And my story's kind of unique in the sense that I was voted the scholar athlete in that school, and then ended up getting into drugs after high school. So I was committed not to touch any drugs or even alcohol. Right. And then fast forward a few years, some trauma mixed in there, new group of friends, and then all of a sudden, from scholar athlete to being, the homeless substance challenge with substance use, same town. So,
I mean, you just described the type of student that it's not going to happen to that
right.
kid.
Exactly. Exactly, man.
And yet there it is. And just, I the reason I asked, I just, I know, sometimes, the young kids, they still think that it's not going to happen to them, but just a little, implementation of somebody's life experience, can do something, right? And
totally.
Definitely our youth need to be inspired in different ways and not just live in that it's not, I'm immune, it's not going to happen to me type of mentality.
Yeah. You do lots of speaking, so you have come across lots of people. Obviously there's Q&A questions. What I know what the narrative is here in British Columbia, in our local area. There's a fight between harm reduction and abstinence and pathways of recovery, and my pathway is better than your pathway. And a lot of people don't know it exists sometimes because it's done, at really high levels. But we're all fighting for dollars in space. What's a common what's the narrative where you're at? Like, what's the common questions and conversations? What's going on in your area when it comes to addiction, and what do you find are common questions?
Very similar. In fact, what you're describing is the conversation where I'm at. So I'm in Massachusetts, and there's a lot of the same conversation. And what I find is the questions from professionals are, is this working? Meaning the current way that we're going about things. The questions from clients are, how can we get more resources? But those resources aren't necessarily tied to outcomes. So that's where there's this lack of discernment, in my opinion. There's professionals who are trying to figure out, like, is this actually working, what we're doing, which is a lot of the harm reduction model. And it does work in some cases, right? But then there's also cases where it doesn't. And so there's very little discernment around that. And then from the client level, it's like, how do we get more resources?
What's going on with North America?
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. And
Yeah.
you're now in a recovery lifestyle and so forth. 1997 you graduated high school. Times definitely has changed since then. I think you said graduated high school.
Yeah.
In this conversation that's going on between pathways and so forth, I like what you said, how the problem isn't the pathways. The problem is, finding out what the outcomes are of all these pathways. Really the research, you follow the money, and that's the research outcomes. I mean, anybody that thinks research outcomes isn't tied to the money, really doesn't know what they're
Yeah.
talking about. I mean, yeah, marijuana is this miracle thing that's happened. And I know lots of people that take medical marijuana, but look who's paying for the research. It's the medical marijuana industry. So my question to you is, and where do you see us going in the future? You're doing these TED Talks, and you're doing these conversations, and you're talking with healthcare professionals, and you're also having TED Talks and conversations with just regular folks that are interested or need help. Like the direction we're going to, Massachusetts has got a huge recovery community out there and so forth. How do you see some solutions? Like, do you think it's safe supply? Do you think it's decriminalization? What do you think?
Yeah, there's so much there.
Well,
I think
yeah, and you got 3 minutes to pretty much answer that. So
I think that we're heading in two directions simultaneously. I think that the push for harm reduction and medication assisted treatment is going to expand tremendously. And I think that's going to be to its own detriment in some ways. And I think simultaneously, there's going to be ecosystems of individuals who realize that that's not a long-term solution, and are going to move away from that, and are going to create their own, ecosystem is kind of the way I think of it, their own ecosystem of possibility and results. And that will show up in more of a holistic model, right? A less allopathic symptom management model, and more of a holistic, nutrition, yoga, meditation, exercise, like looking at the things that are heavily connected to a better life and also a long-term outcome in recovery. A simple one that I found out about recently was nutritional deficiencies. So something as simple as like an amino acid deficiency can really offset neurotransmitters. So instead of getting on an antidepressant, for example, it can be really helpful to actually look at the nutrition first and see if that works. Now, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not telling somebody that they should stop or start a medication, but that's just an interesting shift, rather than this narrow lens of like only medication, only harm reduction, right? I think it's important we look at other solutions as possibilities.
Well, you're listening to Talk Recovery Radio. We come to you live every Thursday, noon to 1, powered by New West Recovery, Canada's recovery community. And shout out to Vancouver Co-op Radio and Kimmett, who replays the show for us on the radio. We're not in the studio because of this little thing called COVID. We're not allowed down there, but looking forward to heading back to the studio. Hopefully we'll see you all at the studio soon. Thanks for being on the show. We really appreciate it. Dylan Ludgren.
Thank you, guys.
And your website is your name, dylanludgren.com. And you'll get links to his TED Talk and other resources and so forth. To the show's theme has been men helping men, people helping people, because that's really at the end of the day, we need to still have hope that people are going to help people. And that's what we do. And yeah, doctors can help, but people need to be part of that equation. So I really appreciate you being on the show. Darren, always good to see you on Thursday. Take care. We'll catch you next Thursday on Talk Recovery Radio. Dylan, have yourself a great day. And thanks for listening, Darren. Everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.